Please don't tell our children. I beg you, don't tell them. Her voice trembled, her eyes wide with fear as I opened my laptop. The video had barely started, but it already said everything. There she was, wrapped around David, my son's best friend. A passionate kiss, a playful slap on the back, a lingering, intimate gaze. She collapsed into sobs, but for the first time in my life, I felt nothing but cold indifference. Every memory of my devoted, loving wife of 25 years shattered like glass beneath my feet. I had suspected, I had searched for proof, and now I had it. Not just betrayal, but betrayal with the boy I had treated like a son. This is not just a story about infidelity. It's the story of a husband deceived, a father watching his family crumble, and a truth so painful it could destroy a person. But this is not the end. Join me on this journey, and you'll see that sometimes betrayal doesn't just end a marriage, it destroys a life. For 25 years, I have been united in marriage with what I have always perceived as my perfect companion. She possesses an extraordinary beauty, sharp intellect, and a vibrant spirit, all complemented by a genuinely kind heart. At the age of 58, I find myself alongside her at 53. Though our personalities may vary, they harmoniously enhance one another. I tend to be more reserved, analytical, and a bit cerebral, whereas she embodies extroversion, intuition, and a deep sense of empathy. Our interests align beautifully, and we find joy in engaging in the same activities together. Our journeys have taken us far and wide, and we are blessed with 3 children, 2 daughters, and a delightful surprise in our son. Our eldest is 20, currently a sophomore in college, situated about 90 miles away from home. We have been fortunate to indulge in the luxury of extended family vacations every 5 months, often venturing to new locales, particularly islands and beachfront havens. We find ourselves in a state of well-being, and the laughter of our children fills our lives with immense happiness. At times, we extend invitations to our family and friends, graciously taking care of their flight and accommodation expenses. Life has been wonderful. I experienced marriage once, spanning 4 years, yet it proved to be an ill-suited union. In those days, I was youthful, naive, and heavily reliant on others for emotional support. In retrospect, I can't help but wonder if my ex-wife harbored a personality disorder as our final years together unfolded into a true nightmare. She requested a divorce, citing reasons that eluded my comprehension in that moment. At this moment, it dawns on me that she may have engaged in an emotional or physical affair. In that moment, I found myself lost, my reactions faltering, and the weight of devastation bore down on me. Yet as time passed, I arrived at a pivotal juncture, yearning only for the anguish to cease. The dissolution of their marriage was swift yet steeped in bitterness, marred by contentious financial disagreements. Once it concluded, a wave of relief washed over me, leaving no room for regrets. In my professional journey, I experienced a remarkable trajectory, attaining senior roles within a global corporation at a notably young age. Nevertheless, a rare illness that led to hearing loss compelled me to step away from my professional journey. We find ourselves in a position of financial stability, drawing upon my savings and investments for our livelihood. Throughout the years, I have diligently saved and invested with careful consideration. While I relish the autonomy to manage my investments, I find myself yearning for the camaraderie of collaboration and the opportunity to guide a professional team in creating something greater. Throughout my career, I believed our marriage was in a good place. It seemed we had transitioned from the fervor of youthful love to a more seasoned and steady partnership. We have support that allows us to venture out together whenever we desire, both as a couple and as a family. The challenges posed by my hearing loss have weighed heavily on us. It is quite disheartening, as I find myself unable to partake in numerous group discussions these days. I find myself longing for it, and in its absence, I've grown increasingly reserved. Laboring in solitude proves unhelpful as well. Navigating my hearing loss has occasionally cast a shadow of distance between my wife and me, a source of frustration for us both. She often finds herself having to reiterate her words to me, and I tend to become irritated with greater ease. It is disheartening when my keen intellect is stifled by the inability to hear or engage in collective discussions. For weeks, perhaps even months, I have found myself in the role of an observer. My temper has grown shorter, and my patience in conversation has waned, often due to my tendency to overlook details. In lengthy conversations, I prefer to cut to the chase and absorb all the details. I realize this may come across as rather direct. What brings me to this moment? About 3 months ago, a suspicion began to take root in my mind, and it has been a persistent source of unease ever since. In my impatience and unease, I rushed into confrontation with my wife, neglecting to gather further evidence first. This suspicion has evolved, spreading from a subtle doubt into a resounding inquiry. Is my wife manipulating my perception regarding her infidelity? A nagging sensation lingers within me, suggesting that my wife harbors an attraction for my son's best friend, who is just 21 years old. The beginning unfolded approximately 3 months prior to August 2019. As we geared up for our family vacation, our three children buzzed with excitement, and my son had just returned home from school. The journey had been meticulously arranged several months prior. Typically, my wife assumes the role of planner for our vacation destinations, driven by her passion for travel, and I find joy in witnessing her excitement grow in the weeks leading up to our adventures. Our social life has consistently been vibrant, primarily revolving around a particular circle of friends, most of whom are familiar to both of us, and nearly all of whom are married. My wife frequently enjoys dinner outings with her married friends, venturing out once or twice a week, whether to a restaurant or a cozy gathering at someone's home. Her calendar often overflows, and she struggles to decline any invitation that comes her way. We usually align our plans with family and friends well in advance. It struck me as peculiar to overhear my wife in the kitchen, not merely coordinating schedules, but passionately persuading someone to accompany us on a trip. The words reached me faintly, yet it seemed she was expressing sentiments akin to, "It will be an absolute delight," reminiscent of our previous experience. We can embark on a boat ride, stroll along the beach, explore the underwater world through snorkeling, and so much more. It seemed as though she was attempting to entice a young one with sweet confections. As she became aware of my presence behind her, a jolt of surprise coursed through her, causing her to nearly fumble the phone from her grasp. She grasped her chest as though I had dealt her a heart-stopping blow, only to swiftly feign that nothing was amiss. I cast her a bewildered glance, contemplating the events that had just unfolded. She entered the pantry, only to re-emerge into the kitchen, as if seeking a moment to gather her thoughts. She inquired about my dinner preferences, a question she had posed just a few hours prior, which struck me as peculiar. After selecting my dinner once more, I departed the kitchen to reunite with my children in the living room, where we settled in to enjoy some television together. Moments later, I found myself gathered around the dining table with my wife and children, sharing a meal while engaging in conversation about school, friendships, and various other subjects. It was then that my wife brought up a message from my son's friend, whom we'll refer to as David. He had reached out to her, showing a desire to accompany us on our forthcoming vacation. This instantly piqued my son's interest, and he made it clear that he hadn't mentioned our vacation to David because he planned to invite his girlfriend. My son informed me that David had sent him a text just moments ago, conveying his eagerness to accompany us on the trip. My son sought our input before replying to his friend, yet he was grateful to my wife for mentioning it earlier. My son had let us know that he intended to bring his girlfriend along on the trip, which made it somewhat peculiar to extend an invitation to his friend, as he would probably be preoccupied with his new romance for the majority of the time. Furthermore, I harbored doubts regarding my wife's honesty about the text message, as I now suspect that David could have been the individual she was conversing with on the phone, attempting to convince him to join our vacation. All the while, she presented it as though David had proposed the notion. David is a remarkable young man, and he forged a deep friendship with my son when they were just 14, their bond blossoming at a summer camp. His parents, both of African-American descent, reside in a middle-class neighborhood nestled within the heart of the inner city. They are diligent individuals, both engaged in a role within a delivery service. To safeguard their identity, I shall refrain from providing specifics. Even though my son and David are enrolled in different schools, David's parents have poured significant resources into enrolling him in a range of after-school programs that my son also participated in. They engaged in basketball matches together, and David often came over to our house to enjoy video games with my son. I had encountered his mother on a few occasions, whether she was dropping him off at our home or collecting him after practice. My wife frequently offered to drive him and held a special affection for him. This did not seem out of the ordinary, for David was a disciplined and bright young man, destined for a promising future. He completed his high school journey ahead of my son and pursued his studies at a different college, which meant our encounters had become infrequent since that time. With all this context in mind, I found myself considering the possibility that my wife had fabricated a story to draw David back into our lives. She has a penchant for engaging with underprivileged youth, mentoring minorities, immersing herself in progressive endeavors, and dedicating her time to volunteer work. I was convinced this was yet another of her endeavors. Moreover, I found David appealing due to his impressive maturity for his age, as he was capable of engaging in adult conversations even more effectively than my son. His presence was enjoyable, and considering all these elements, I set aside my doubts. Just 3 days ahead of our much-anticipated vacation, my wife and our 18-year-old daughter set out on a shopping expedition to gather essentials for the journey. The shopping excursion stretched on, yielding not just items for my son, but also a selection of gifts for David. Even had I been aware of this in advance, it would not have struck me as particularly strange, for she had a pattern of gifting him presents during his younger years. The following day, my son's girlfriend made her entrance in the morning, and as the evening unfolded, David joined our gathering as well. That evening brimmed with delight and enjoyment. We ventured out for a meal. My wife nestled beside me while David took a seat next to my daughter. Yet I found myself unable to ignore the way my wife frequently cast her gaze toward David during our meal at the restaurant. As I conversed with her, an air of remarkable cheerfulness enveloped her, leaving me perplexed in that moment. I acquiesced to the situation, for the joy radiating from those around me filled my own heart with delight. Upon our return home that evening, I retired to bed while my wife lingered with the children into the late hours. Though I'm not completely certain, I believe she finally settled into bed around 3 a.m. The following day, as we prepared for our journey, I meticulously reviewed my checklist, determined not to overlook a single item. It dawned on me that my credit card had vanished. Once we had meticulously packed our bags for the journey ahead, I embarked on a thorough search. Yet it eluded me completely. As I rummaged through my wife's luggage, which she had last used, I stumbled upon a strikingly bold open-back bow, crotchless bikini she had purchased. I deemed it unsuitable, particularly for a mother of her years. Yet I was under the impression that she had purchased it as a delightful surprise for me while we were away. The next day, we boarded a business-class flight bound for our vacation destination, nestled in the southwest of Barbados, specifically at Carlisle Bay. The resort unfolded like a dream, a breathtaking haven of opulence nestled along the southern coast of Antigua, where the Caribbean waves kiss the shore in a symphony of tranquility. The stunning white sand beach and tranquil turquoise waters created an atmosphere reminiscent of paradise, marking it as one of the most beautiful resorts in Antigua. On the inaugural day of our getaway, I found myself largely unwinding on the shore, engrossed in investment articles from the Wall Street Journal. In the meantime, my family embarked on a scuba diving adventure. As the sun dipped below the horizon, my wife, my son, his girlfriend, and David ventured out to a lively disco bar. I chose to dine at a restaurant with my daughter. When my wife and the others came back home roughly 3 hours after my daughter and I observed that my wife seemed a little tipsy. She roused me from slumber for a moment of closeness, and it turned out to be one of the most memorable experiences we had shared in months. I presumed that something had truly ignited her passion during her evening escapade. The next day unfolded with the sun casting its warm glow over the beach, where I found myself immersed in the soothing rhythm of the waves alongside my wife. As the evening unfolded, she informed me of her plans to dine at a restaurant alongside my daughter, son, his girlfriend, and David. Yet as the clock struck 10 a.m., my son arrived home with his girlfriend and sister, only to discover that my wife and David had mysteriously vanished. I inquired about my wife's whereabouts, and they informed me that she had gone out with David on a local wildlife tour. In the stillness of that night, at the stroke of 1 a.m., I stirred from my slumber to find my wife absent from my side. I longed to savor the ocean breeze as I awaited her return. Upon opening the door that led into the living room, I caught sight of a swift motion flitting around the couch. The television flickered in the background as I observed my wife feigning repose on one of the couches, while David occupied the adjacent seat. My wife donned a revealing wrap knot cover-up skirt, and beneath it, I recalled the vibrant hue of the open-back bow, crotchless bikini I had glimpsed in her luggage. They sat apart, their gazes fixed on the television, an air of awkwardness enveloping the room. Despite the open windows, the room carried a weight, and the unmistakable aroma of intimacy lingered in the air. Though my hearing might be waning, the acuity of my other senses surged to remarkable heights in that instant. I harbored a suspicion that David had shared an intimate bond with my wife. Had I turned the handle with greater care, I am certain I would have witnessed their transgression firsthand. In that fleeting moment, uncertainty enveloped me, leaving me at a loss for how to respond. I stole a fleeting glance at both of them, and the atmosphere was thick with discomfort. Upon hearing the door creak open, they instinctively distanced themselves from one another. David stood there in nothing but shorts, shirtless, a sight not entirely out of place considering our suite's closeness to the ocean. Yet it was evident he was attempting to blend into the hardwood around him. I stepped back into the bedroom, my wife trailing behind, putting on an act of normalcy. I could feel the intimacy that lingered in the air, as if she were attempting to persuade me that all was mundane, that they had merely been engrossed in a television show. That night I remained silent, rendered speechless by the weight of unspoken thoughts. An all-consuming wave of self-pity washed over me, accompanied by the heavy shadows of depression and the stark solitude of loneliness. The interplay of my hearing loss and the sense of betrayal enveloped me in a haunting solitude, as though I were gradually fading from the awareness of my wife and family. I found myself engulfed in a profound sense of humiliation, weighed down by an overwhelming tide of shame. The night was fraught with restlessness, and as dawn broke, I realized I possessed no tangible proof. Yet all the pieces, from the instant I caught her on the phone, convincing David to accompany us on our getaway, to the nearly compromising scenario I almost stumbled upon, appeared to fall into place. At that moment, I harbored a deep suspicion that my wife was involved in a physical affair with my son's friend. Though I possessed no definitive proof, merely a collection of circumstantial hints, the weight of my unease drove me to confront my wife. That morning, I summoned her into the room and confessed that I had witnessed her intimacy with David. I implored her to speak truthfully and inquired about the duration of this situation. Her response was utterly uncharacteristic and quite strange. She passionately refuted all allegations and was profoundly distressed that I would entertain such an idea. She stooped to name-calling, even daring to label me deaf and a jerk. Her strategies proved effective, leading her to victory in the debate. Without any evidence at my disposal, I found myself powerless, constrained by the absence of solid proof. She went so far as to assert that I was not merely losing my hearing, but also my grip on sanity. Her determination was palpable, her voice rising to a level that made me anxious my children might overhear her. The mere idea of my children uncovering my baseless jealousy towards the young man they had known for more than 7 years, believing he was growing too close to their mother, painted a picture of a disastrous and humiliating scenario. Ultimately, I discovered myself in a challenging position, the one compelled to extend an apology. I sensed that I ought to have collected more evidence prior to confronting her. My emotions overwhelmed me, despite my usual inclination towards logic and reason. In hindsight, I realized I ought to have paused to reflect, for deep down, I understood she would reject it. The rest of our vacation was nothing short of miserable. My wife regarded me with a sense of disdain, as if I were nothing more than an unwelcome inconvenience. I sensed that a portion of her respect for me had slipped away. Yet beneath the surface, I understood that my emotions were genuine. I found myself utterly convinced that she was manipulating my perception, and I was certain that her proximity to David on the couch was more than mere friendship. Yet I lacked the evidence to substantiate my suspicions. 2 days ago, I confronted my wife regarding my suspicions about her involvement with David. True to form, she passionately refuted the claim. Since that moment, she has been enveloped in silence, and even our children have sensed the shift, yet we have chosen to keep it to ourselves. I've observed that she no longer spends time alone with David and has begun engaging in activities with all of us around. This vacation was meant to be a time for us, me, her, and our three children, to unite, not to create distance between us. Our past vacations brimmed with camaraderie, fishing excursions, delightful picnics, and so much more. Her insistence on inviting him this time left me perplexed. David has joined us on vacations in the past, after all. At the age of 19, we embarked on a vacation together with him. As I remember it, my time was largely shared with my wife. Yet I am not one to thrive in the night, often retreating to bed early. Conversely, she thrives in the night, suggesting that if any indiscretion occurred in the past, it would have unfolded while I was lost in slumber. A persistent sensation lingers within me, suggesting that this affair has been unfolding for an extended period. It seems to me that she embraced greater risks this time around, perhaps due to the infrequency of her encounters with David, who has been preoccupied with his college commitments. In retrospect, I find myself pondering her regular late-night dinners with married friends, occurring at least once or twice each week. These gatherings, it seems, take place with greater regularity during David's college breaks. Our bond has consistently thrived, yet I've observed her desire intensifying with the passage of time while my own seems to wane. We continue to share private moments once a week, and if it were solely her decision, they might occur even more often. I find myself pondering whether my diminished intimate engagement has contributed to this situation. Only 2 days remain before our vacation draws to a close. It appears that all around us, joy abounds. Yet my wife and I find ourselves on the outside looking in. Tonight, I feel compelled to address the tension that lingers between us. I long to press the reset button and return to the way things were before I faced her. I wish to dispel this tension before another day passes, and I certainly do not wish to bring it home with me. I took my wife aside and proposed that we dine at a quiet restaurant to discuss our matters, and she consented. As the evening unfolded and the children engaged in their various pursuits, I slipped into a floral shirt, while she adorned herself in a sundress. The restaurant lay a mere 300 yards from our resort, prompting us to embark on a leisurely stroll to reach it. A table had been reserved for us, perfectly positioned to gaze upon the ocean, a truly breathtaking view. We occupied a small table for two, and I lingered in silence, wishing she would take the initiative to break the stillness between us. It seemed to me that I had erred initially by disclosing my knowledge too hastily. This time my intention was to create an atmosphere of comfort for her, to express my sincere apologies for the unfounded accusations, and to allow her voice to take center stage in our conversation. I had every intention of doing so. Observe intently, anticipating her misstep. Throughout the years, I have placed my unwavering trust in her and devoted everything I have. Yet she has shattered that trust by showing me disrespect, embarking on an affair with a man significantly younger than her own son, and deceiving me about it. She attempted to manipulate my emotions, casting me in the role of a fool. I am the architect of this family's unity, and I have toiled diligently to cultivate the prosperity she now relishes. Even the dress she dons is mine. She appears to believe that my journey to this moment has been marked by a certain innocence. I must confess that I have been wholly absorbed by my work, and perhaps my hearing loss has diverted my attention. It is a bitter truth that I extended my trust to my wife, neglecting to observe her actions closely enough. The situation is already troubling with her affair, but the fact that it involves my son's friend, someone she was meant to guide, makes it all the more personal. Following a moment of uncomfortable quiet, my wife broke the stillness with her voice. She expressed her regrets for not dedicating as much time to me during this vacation as we typically do. She recognized that my doubts regarding her relationship with David had emerged due to their intimate camaraderie. She gazed straight into my eyes and declared, "I never slept with him." I merely inclined my head in acknowledgement, silence enveloping us both. She went on, conveying her awareness of my recent distance, which she attributed in part to my hearing loss, and her attempts to bridge the gap between us. She expressed her regret for the painful words she had uttered previously, clarifying that her anger had driven her to speak inappropriately. She expressed her unwavering loyalty and dedication to our bond. Her initial remarks carried a sense of optimism, and I found myself wishing that this exchange would pave the way for a more candid and sincere discussion. I acknowledged that I had not been my true self lately and conveyed a longing for us to deepen our connection during the vacation. I skillfully sidestepped any reference to David or the affair. We savored a delightful romantic lunch together, strolling back to the resort hand in hand. The rest of our time together unfolded quietly, as my wife sought to share moments with me. Yet it still came across as contrived, as if she were reluctant to be present. Perhaps it was merely my imagination at work, now that I had uncovered the affair, and the vision of my once innocent and devoted wife lay in ruins. I sensed that I had been shrouded in darkness, yet now clarity enveloped me. Following our heartfelt reconciliation over dinner, the children were blissfully unaware that anything was out of the ordinary. Yet an unsettling sense lingered within me, as if pieces of a puzzle were conspicuously missing. In that moment, it struck me that I had set up cameras throughout our home, monitoring shared spaces such as the front porch, the backyard, both sides of the house, the living room, the home theater, and the game room. The cameras retained their recordings for a span of 30 days before they were automatically erased. I held on to the hope that they had managed to capture something damning, something that would affirm I was not spiraling into madness. With a sense of anticipation, I was ready to head home, clutching this potential evidence. I maintained the facade that all was well for the duration of our visit. To my wife, it likely seemed like a narrow escape. She probably thought I had completely overlooked it, convinced that she had deftly twisted my understanding. She portrayed the ideal image of a mother and wife, yet a sense of disgust lingered within me, for I suspected she reveled in her ability to deceive me. It left me with the sense that she might have participated in such conduct during our time together. Throughout my journey, both personally and professionally, the values of honesty and loyalty have always held a place of utmost importance in my heart. Being misled or sensing betrayal is something I absolutely loathe. As we arrived back from our journey, a wave of exhilaration washed over me. I hesitated to let my hopes soar regarding the possibility of discovering anything on the cameras, as my wife was fully cognizant of their existence. She had genuinely urged me to install them after noticing them at her friend's residence. I never imagined she would be so reckless as to partake in any dubious behavior within the gaze of the camera. Yet I clung to the hope that perhaps she had faltered this time. Paranoia enveloped me. Her awareness of my suspicions filled me with dread. I feared she would hasten home to obliterate the recordings before I could examine them. My wife lacks a certain familiarity with technology, making the task of wiping the memory beyond her reach. Nevertheless, she may endeavor to sabotage the camera's storage, rendering it impossible for me to access any information. Once we stepped off the plane, I turned to my wife and confessed that I wasn't feeling quite right. I feigned illness with great conviction and requested that she collect a prescription on my behalf. She typically manages my prescriptions, and although I was convinced I didn't require a refill, I pretended to have left the medication at the resort. I informed her that the children and I would be taking a separate taxi home, allowing me some time to rest. David hailed a different taxi to make his way to his parents' residence. Upon my arrival home, I promptly transferred the footage from 2 days prior to our vacation onto a portable hard drive. Those were the days when David graced our home with his presence. The download required a bit of patience, yet it concluded just in time for my wife's return. I watched her intently, searching for any sign that she might check the camera's storage or attempt to interfere with it. Yet she moved through her surroundings as if the cameras were mere figments of imagination, completely oblivious to their presence. We toiled until the clock struck midnight, finally completing the unpacking process. My mind was consumed with the urgency of tucking everyone in for the night, eager to delve into the footage, awaiting my scrutiny. As the world around me succumbed to slumber, I plugged the hard drive into my laptop and embarked on the formidable journey of sifting through the recordings. I advanced to the precise moment of David's visit. Upon his arrival that evening, he took refuge in the guest bedroom, which lay just beyond a hallway leading from the game room. While I swiftly navigated through the footage, I caught a glimpse of my wife on the game room camera. I pressed play at a regular pace, and the clock displayed 05:03 a.m. In the hallway, captured by the watchful eye of the game room camera, my wife encountered David. He drew her close, their lips meeting in a fervent kiss, lost in the intensity of the moment. With a playful shove, she turned her back on him and made her way from the game chamber. With a playful gesture, he gave her a light slap on the backside, prompting a cascade of giggles as she made her way toward the main area. Even to someone devoid of sight, it was unmistakably clear that they were entangled in an affair. That was the only evidence I required. My heart pounded with such intensity that I feared I might be on the brink of a heart attack. Though anger eluded me, a wave of relief washed over me as I finally possessed the evidence needed to confront my unfaithful wife. Just as I was preparing to shut my laptop, she re-emerged on the screen once more, around 1:15 a.m. She made her way straight to the guest hallway, likely on her way to the guest bedroom where David was residing. She finally made her appearance at 2:47 a.m. With my son's girlfriend occupying the guest room, David found himself the sole inhabitant of the house. It was evident that she had entered the guest bedroom with him for an intimate rendezvous. Afterwards, she strolled toward the central area and then made her way to our matrimonial bed where I lay sleeping. Equipped with the proof I sought, I chose not to rouse her the following morning. I reached out to my lawyer, who directed me to a divorce attorney. On the same day, I arranged a meeting, and following our discussion, I gained a clearer insight into the substantial financial repercussions this divorce would impose on me. Even with the weight of financial consequences looming, I understood that I had to commit to the separation agreement. Continuing a marriage with someone untrustworthy, who had deceived me and deflected blame, became impossible. She even went so far as to accuse me of prejudice while exploiting a young man she was meant to guide. I came to understand that it would be best for my children to remain unaware of the intricacies of the divorce, as I wished to shield them from any feelings of animosity towards their mother. Yet I felt no inclination for David to continue being a part of our existence. While I acknowledged the situation and understood that he may not have been the one to start the affair, I found myself unwilling to endure a perpetual reminder of my wife's betrayal. The question of whether I would ever share this with my son and daughters lingered in the air, shrouded in uncertainty. Nevertheless, I planned to leverage it as a bargaining chip in my discussions with my wife that evening, with the children away from home. I refined the video to showcase solely the moment when my wife and David shared an intimate kiss, along with her excursion to the guest bedroom from 1:15 a.m. to 2:47 a.m. I beckoned her into the room and set it playing on my laptop. Only moments into the experience, she came to a startling realization and instinctively shielded her face with her hands. She averted her gaze from the screen, silent and unyielding, refusing to engage with any of my inquiries. I sought to uncover the intricacies of their relationship, yearning to learn when it all began. Yet she remained tight-lipped, offering no answers. She wept, acutely conscious that no justification existed. I seized that moment to let her experience a glimpse of what she had put me through during our journey. I addressed her by different names, yet the sole moment I elicited a response was when I brought up the idea of sharing the video with our children. In an instant, her tears ceased, her gaze locked onto mine, and she fell to her knees, pleading earnestly. She vowed to comply with any request I made to keep me from disclosing it to our children. I articulated my conditions. She certainly would. Agree to the alimony I have chosen to offer, and we shall move forward with a cordial divorce under my terms. In exchange, I consented to uphold the narrative that our separation stemmed from irreconcilable differences. The next day, we assembled our children and shared the news of our divorce. My wife and our 3 children were in attendance. The children posed countless inquiries and exerted every effort to inspire us toward reconciliation. Yet my errant spouse fulfilled her role, upholding the narrative that we had both been discontent for some time and that parting ways was the most prudent choice. The night was steeped in emotion. My wife endeavored to mask her feelings, hoping the children would believe she was the one instigating the divorce. Yet it was evident that I was the one taking that step. Despite our best efforts to conceal the truth, her emotions spilled forth, casting a deep shadow over our family on that sorrowful day. I endeavored to maintain my composure, yet solitude in the bedroom led to an unbidden release of tears. Indeed, that is the reality we face. Yet another marriage has crumbled, succumbing to the same familiar fate. I find myself pondering the reasons behind my repeated journeys down the aisle. Following our conversation with the children regarding our separation, it was only natural for them to grapple with the news. My youngest, now at the age of 16, bore the brunt of it the most. She found herself perplexed by the inability to find common ground. The next day, my eldest daughter approached me in the room that my wife and I once shared. My wife has taken to sleeping in the guest room now. My daughter shared with me that she had attempted to contact her mother, knocking on her door, yet there was no reply to be found. She found herself perplexed, pondering the moments when everything had taken a turn for the worse, especially since just days prior, we had all appeared so content during our vacation getaway. She perched beside me on the bed, her eyes searching for the truth behind the divorce. Her incessant weeping nearly caused me to falter as the weight of her distress bore heavily upon me. She remarked that we had excluded them from our lives, and that troubled me, for I didn't believe we had done so. Yet I offered her comfort, assuring her that her mother would reach out once the storm had settled. I conveyed that her mother and I shared a wonderful marriage and had the privilege of raising 3 beautiful children, for which I felt immense gratitude. Yet there arrives a moment when affection wanes, and that is precisely what transpired. I provided her with a rather ambiguous response, and she was astute enough to pick up on that. She may have exited the room, harboring suspicions of my wife's unfaithfulness, yet she refrained from pressing me too hard, perhaps apprehensive of the truths that might unfold. Given her close bond with her mother, I assumed the truth would come to light before long. The next day, I attended an appointment with my otolaryngologist regarding a hearing aid that greatly enhanced my auditory experience. My wife stayed hidden away in her room for a few days. We usually gather for dinner as a family, yet my children opted to take their meals to their rooms, and I found myself not seeing my wife at all throughout the day. At the dining table, solitude enveloped me. My eldest daughter possesses remarkable culinary skills, often taking charge of meal preparation for the family upon her return from college. She is an exceptional young person, and my pride in her knows no bounds. Once we were a quintessential American family, gathering around the dinner table, sharing kisses and declarations of love, and attending church together as one. It was profoundly unsettling to witness my children dining separately, as our family seemed to unravel before my eyes. Years of effort had gone into crafting this family into what it had become, only for my wife to shatter it with her infidelity. Seated in solitude at the dining table, a surge of anger towards my wife coursed through me, yet I found myself grappling with the uncertainty of whether my actions were justified. I wasn't discontent with the marriage prior to D-Day, and it wasn't as if I lacked intimacy with my wife. I've come across tales of wives who stray, cloaking their infidelities in a veil of denial, distancing themselves from their husbands. Yet my experience was quite different. Throughout our marriage, my wife has consistently offered me intimacy and affection, never once denying me that connection. She cared for me with such warmth, making me feel like I was her foremost concern, even before the arrival of our children. In the depths of my being, a sense of jealousy and betrayal stirred within me. I pondered whether her liaison with David stemmed from an unquenchable yearning she felt compelled to fulfill. Perhaps David was the most convenient choice for her, as he was always within reach. I longed for it to have been someone beyond our intimate circle. It wouldn't have simplified matters, yet it wouldn't have involved someone whom my son regards as his closest friend, someone deeply intertwined with our family. The following day, after my son's girlfriend departed, I found an opportunity to converse with my son. Even though we skimmed over the specifics, he refrained from questioning the reasons behind our separation. He merely sought to understand how I was managing. It was evident that he had been conversing with my daughter, revealed by the manner in which he posed his inquiries. After a day had passed, my wife finally surfaced from her depths of sorrow. Her appearance suggested a recent struggle with tears, eyes puffy and red, hair in disarray, and an overall sense of neglect that hinted she hadn't bathed in days. That evening, we dined on the meal my daughter had lovingly prepared. Yet we found ourselves seated at opposite ends of the dining table. I found myself believing that I ought to be the one in pain, tears streaming down my face, eyes swollen from sorrow, while my wife should be the one pleading on her knees for forgiveness. Instead, I found myself in solitude, shouldering the weighty secret of her affair, unable to share it with my children. My children appeared to be more focused on their mother's well-being, as she seemed to be struggling significantly. Typically, she embodies the spirit of the gathering, radiating joy and ensuring that everyone feels embraced and valued. She possesses a deep sense of nurturing and care. While I am undeniably wounded by this, I have honed the art of concealing my pain and feigning that all is well. The next day, my wife inquired if we could visit a restaurant we both enjoy for a conversation. Though the pain of her betrayal lingered within me, the mounting tension between us and the children compelled me to take a step forward. I realized that breaking the ice was necessary. If we were to part ways, as intended, it ought to be executed with grace and understanding. We traveled together in the same vehicle, exchanging few words throughout the journey. As we settled into our seats, she wasted no time in offering her sincere apologies. She admitted her regret for the hurt she had inflicted upon me and for the betrayal of my trust. She expressed her deep embarrassment and shame, revealing that she felt too uncomfortable to step outside our room. She confessed to her selfishness, propelled by instinct, neglecting the repercussions for those she holds dear. She expressed her profound affection for me and her longing to share a lifetime together. She disclosed that she had not fully grasped the depth of the suffering she had caused until she was uncovered. I waited patiently for her to complete her apology before I replied. I observed that her regret appeared to arise from the act of being discovered, and I believed it was our duty to maintain honesty with our children. At the moment I brought this up, her demeanor transformed into one of evident distress. She bowed her head, cradling it with both hands as though beset by a throbbing ache. She lifted her gaze, tears shimmering in her eyes, and started to fan herself, as though struggling to catch her breath. I maintained my composure, refusing to respond to her theatrical outburst. She paused, a hush enveloping her as she confessed that she recognized the inevitability of revealing the truth, yet required time to summon the strength to do so. She asked about methods to preserve our relationship. She proposed the notion of permitting an open marriage for me, while she would uphold her commitment to fidelity. She implored me not to urge her to reveal the truth to the children, proposing instead that we maintain this secret between ourselves. I urged her to reveal the truth to the children. I inquired about the duration of the affair. She asserted that the affair had persisted for 6 years. It's worth noting that David was likely still in high school at that time. I urged her to elaborate, and she recounted that the initial incident took place by chance. It was at the time of our youngest daughter's basketball game. She was meant to attend our daughter's inaugural basketball game alongside our son, who had extended an invitation to David to accompany them. The game was set to commence at approximately 5 p.m. Yet a delay ensued, leaving our daughter to practice with her team while our son either observed or engaged with his phone. Details she couldn't quite remember. David found himself nestled between her and our son as she initiated a conversation with him. She expressed a desire for some fresh air, and David chose to accompany her. They found themselves in her minivan, where a series of events unfolded, culminating in a kiss and a moment of intimacy in the back seat, all set against the backdrop of the high school parking lot. She confessed to feeling a sense of guilt and worthlessness regarding the situation, and they vowed to keep it a secret and never let it happen again. Yet as time passed, their close encounters persisted. Prior to our getaway, she had not laid eyes on him for more than half a year. She asserted that the thought had not crossed her mind until David arrived to accompany us on our vacation. I felt that she was holding back the complete narrative. I understood that David hadn't made the decision to come on his own. She had persuaded him to attend. I brought this fact to her attention before she finally acknowledged it. She yearned for another chance to see him, and the thought of vacationing together had long been a dream, making her believe this was the moment she had been waiting for. She admitted that they had shared a closeness the day prior to our vacation, captured by security cameras, and that their intimacy continued throughout the trip when I stumbled upon them. She conveyed her deep affection for him admitting that the pull of physical closeness is irresistible when they are together. Yet she reassured me that her love for me endures unwaveringly. She underscored that her connection with him was solely physical, perhaps in an effort to soothe my feelings about the situation. She noted that with the passage of time, her yearning for intimacy has grown considerably. She expressed that the diminished intimacy left her in a state of perpetual dissatisfaction and frustration, as my desire for it had waned compared to hers. She declared her profound affection for me, yet confessed to enduring sexual frustration for an extended period. In her struggle, she sought solace in David, and as time passed, her desires spiraled beyond her control, leading her to accept the affair as a new normal. She disclosed that she had reached out to a psychotherapist and was prescribed antidepressants intended for conditions such as depression, anxiety, or obsessive-compulsive disorder, which may assist in managing compulsive sexual behaviors. Nevertheless, she ceased the medication, troubled by the potential side effects. She asserted that psychotherapy and the use of specific adult toys had offered her some solace, yet the affair with David continued unabated. She insisted that he was the sole individual with whom she had strayed, and that the therapy and adult toys had aided her in controlling her desires. As she unveiled this trove of information, previously hidden from me, a wave of bewilderment and guilt washed over me. I pondered whether earlier awareness could have prompted me to pursue male enhancement medication to align with her expectations. When I inquired why she hadn't shared all this with me earlier, she replied that she had alluded to it multiple times, though not extensively, dropping subtle hints throughout our conversations. She sensed that I had already distanced myself from our closeness. She highlighted that my desire for intimacy was limited to 1 or 2 times a week, whereas she yearned for it daily. She spoke of the moments when I had turned away from her advances, highlighting how frequently she had taken the first step towards closeness. She made it clear that her intention was not to place blame on me, recognizing that it was her own sexual desire that strayed from the conventional path. She sought to focus on her own growth, understanding that I was already navigating a considerable amount. Following our discussion at the restaurant, my anger had begun to wane. I sensed the quiet battles my wife faced, coming to understand that she might harbor a near-obsessive yearning for intimacy, striving to navigate her own desires. While I had always been aware of this, I had not truly grasped its significance, as she had not always exhibited such behavior. She was not engaging. She was not truthful when she asserted that she had attempted to express her needs to me, yet I had brushed aside her worries, believing it to be merely a fleeting moment. I was aware she possessed a few toys, yet I had little concern for them, as I was receiving the intimacy I desired whenever I wished. I came to realize that my perspective was rather self-centered, and I ought to have been more attuned to her wishes. It seemed to me that she could be grappling with some kind of illness, and that she had been facing challenges because of it. It brought a measure of relief to grasp her perspective, yet despite her mental state, her actions were undeniably wrong. She shattered the promises we made to each other, and I am convinced that there must be repercussions. Yet at this juncture, I found myself grappling with doubts about my choice to part ways with my unfaithful wife. In search of connection, I arranged a meeting with my therapist. He suggested that, given the intimacy of her connection with her affair partner, she ought to sever ties with David. I inquired whether he believed it was essential to inform my children, but he clarified that he was unable to evaluate the mental state of my wife and children. He also noted that it may not be of great significance, as David could very well choose to share the information with my children directly. Ultimately, what held the greatest significance was my ability to shape the story. He held no firm stance on the matter but proposed that if I decided against informing my children, I should direct my wife to inform David that their affair had come to light and that he was to cease all communication with her and any of my family members henceforth. He suggested contemplating a probation period of 2 to 3 months to assess whether my feelings regarding divorce would persist. He proposed individual counseling for each of us, and, when the topic of couples counseling arose, remarked that it might be advantageous for her to articulate her feelings in the presence of an unbiased observer. Following the therapy session, I found myself grappling with a sense of uncertainty about my feelings concerning the entire situation. As I reflected on the well-being of my children, the enduring bond I had forged with my wife, and the joy we had experienced together as a family, I came to the realization that it might be worthwhile to embrace the opportunity of a 2 to 3 month probation. That evening, I engaged in a conversation about the circumstances with my wife. I expressed that it was essential for her to sever all ties with David and to refrain from any future communication or meetings with him. I also conveyed to her that we would reveal the affair to my son and my eldest daughter, who would subsequently cut off contact with David. I explicitly stated that should she breach these terms, I would move forward with the divorce proceedings I had already begun. She recognized her error and conveyed her readiness to take any necessary steps to restore our marriage. Understanding that the truth would inevitably come to light, she was apprehensive about how our children might view her. Nevertheless, she consented to withhold explicit details and to face the repercussions. After our conversation at the restaurant, the tension in our home started to ease little by little. My children exhibited a blend of curiosity and uncertainty regarding the status of our divorce, yet they had not broached the subject with me directly. At this juncture, my children began to gather for dinner as a family once more, and the household was gradually finding its rhythm again, even though my wife and I continued to occupy separate bedrooms. Following the discussion with my wife about disclosing her affair to our son and daughter, we resolved to confront the matter that very evening. Once dinner had concluded, we ushered our youngest daughter to her room and convened my son and eldest daughter at the dining table. I started by sharing with my children that their mother was the catalyst for my initial wish for a divorce, yet we were currently striving for reconciliation. In order to reach this goal, she found it essential to reveal her deeds. Next, it was my wife's moment to share her thoughts. After a moment of searching for the right words, tears cascaded down her cheeks, while my children observed with wide-eyed curiosity. Regardless of whether her feelings were authentic or merely an act, it was a torment to behold. It seemed to me that she might have been trying to cushion the blow by stirring feelings of compassion. She started by revealing her deep disappointment in herself, lamenting the embarrassment she felt and the significant mistake she made by becoming involved in an inappropriate relationship with David. The atmosphere grew still as I cast my eyes upon my children, seeking to discern their responses. She averted her gaze, her head bowed in a veil of shame, steering clear of any eye contact with my children and me. Upon her admission, my daughter's jaw fell open in disbelief, while my son unleashed a torrent of furious exclamations. With a sudden surge of emotion, he rose to his feet and marched toward his bedroom, the door crashing shut in his wake. At that moment, I found myself seated at the dining table, my daughter 2 chairs to my right, while my wife occupied the opposite side. My daughter's face was a canvas of shock, lingering for what felt like an eternity before she leaned in and, in a hushed yet fervent whisper, declared, "I knew it. I knew it." I stayed in my seat, watching the drama unfold, my feelings a tangled web of confusion as I grappled with how to make sense of it all. My daughter came to me, extending her arms for a hug, and despite my lack of response, she held on to me with a firm grip. In that moment, my wife was weeping openly, and I had a feeling my daughter was quietly crying too. As I observed the depths of my wife's sorrow, a wave of true concern washed over me. Never had I witnessed her in such a state of despair. At last, my wife rose from her seat and exited the room, seeking solace in the guest room, where she quietly closed the door behind her. My daughter inquired about my well-being, and I reassured her that all was well. I conveyed that I had ample time to reflect on the information, and although I had not extended forgiveness to her mother, I did grasp the reasons behind the events that transpired. I expressed my desire to no longer keep them in the dark, which is why I urged her to unveil the truth. That night I lay down to sleep with a tranquil mind, aware that the dawn would bring fresh opportunities, and it was far wiser to embark on this journey with truth rather than remain ensnared in deception. The next morning, my daughter took it upon herself to prepare breakfast for me, while my wife stayed tucked away in her room, and my son had already departed from the house. My daughter revealed that he remained troubled and was contemplating moving out to escape his mother, as he found it unbearable to be in her presence. Throughout the morning, I engaged in conversation with my daughters, particularly my eldest, who endeavored to steer my thoughts away from my wife's betrayal and instill a sense of optimism. As the afternoon wore on, my wife remained cloistered in her room, a fact that began to worry my daughter. They had errands to attend to, and time was slipping away. She rapped on the door for what seemed an eternity, yet my wife remained silent within. As dusk settled in and my wife remained hidden away in her room, a sense of unease began to take hold. I took it upon myself to rap on the door, yet there was no response from her. I had held on to the hope that circumstances were getting better. Yet it seemed my wife was struggling to cope with the situation. At first I suspected she might be too embarrassed to confront my children, yet the circumstances grew ever more strange. That evening at dinner she was absent, and my son had yet to come home. I reached out to him to see how he was doing, and he let me know he was at a friend's house. That evening, it was simply my two daughters and I sharing a meal together. As the dawn broke and silence enveloped the house, a gnawing feeling took root within me. The absence of any message from my wife hinted at an unsettling truth. I resolved to pry the door open with the assistance of my eldest daughter, yet it was secured tightly from within. Upon finally prying the door open, we were met with the sight of my wife, nestled beneath the covers, her face turned downwards. I observed a few pills resting alongside a glass of water in close proximity. Without hesitation, I directed my daughter to make the call. I felt for her pulse, yet her body had begun to shift in hue. My younger daughter wept, shaking my wife in a desperate attempt to rouse her, while my older daughter, on the phone with emergency services, grew more and more agitated. It was evident to anyone that she had succumbed to her fate nearly a day prior. A profound numbness enveloped me, caught in a tumultuous struggle between tears and screams, drowning in a sea of shock and guilt, utterly convinced that I bore the weight of this burden alone. Regaining my composure was a process that required time and patience. The ambulance had reached the scene, its crew readying to secure her in a body bag. Uncertainty loomed over me regarding who had reached out to my son, yet there he was, already present and weeping inconsolably. I devoted nearly the whole night to conversing with the investigators,